Hello, my name is Lee and welcome to this video tutorial. In this video, I'm going to show you how to create landscapes in Unreal Engine 4. Now, to begin with, I've created just a standard third-person template, and I'm going to press the Control and N key, and this will bring up the new level dialog, and I want to choose the first one here. And the reason for that is we get access to the skybox and the light and all those things, but we can simply select the ground and delete it. So we're ready to go. Now, following on from that, what we want to do is we want to go to the mode panel, which is this section here on the left hand side. And we want to select the landscape icon, which is this mountain. Now, once we do that, we're going to be immediately presented with this green grid. Now, this grid is a current representation of what your landscape looks like right now before it has been built. Now, we do have some settings, so let me just move around here and we can see what's going on a little better. Okay, so I'm simply just right-clicking the mouse to move around and using the W, A, S, and D key to move the camera. So the first option is the ability to create a new, or the ability to import from file. So the difference here is that a create new is going to allow us to control all of the parameters of our landscape, and the import from file is going to allow us to use a image, a height map image, in order to import a landscape, and that's going to be something we're going to look at very shortly. Now, below that we have the material, and this is a reference to assigning a landscape material, which is the material that will have your grass and rock and mud and dirt and snow and like whatever it is that you're going to have on your landscape. And so the next option below that is in direct correlation with the material, so we're just going to jump over that for now. Now, below that we have the location, rotation, and scale, and if you've been using Unreal for a while now, you should be pretty familiar with what these do. So the location is the location of this landscape in your world, rotation, whether or not it's rotated or not, and the scale is going to deal with the size of your landscape. Now, I would highly recommend that you do not change the scale value here inside these options. I would recommend that you proceed to use the following settings that are directly below it, and that is the section size. Okay, so the section size is the amount of detail that's inside each component. So a component are these larger squares. So we have 8 that go across and 8 that go sort of up and down. And inside here, there are 64 by 64 squares. Now, if we want to increase the amount of detail or the amount of sections we have, we're also going to increase the size of our landscape. So if we change this to maybe something like 255, you can see that now we have 255 of these small, I guess, kind of like squares or details or polygons in there. And so, but that's basically what that does. So I'm going to set this back to 63 by 63. The next one is the sections per per component. So what this is right now we have one component. However, if we increase this to 2, we have a 2 by 2 a component, basically creating some additional details by adding a subcomponent to our landscape. So I'm going to press the yellow arrow here, which will just reset this back to default. Now, below that we have the number of components, and the number of components is going to directly influence the overall resolution. So these values can be sort of interchanged depending on what you want to do. So for example, this is 8 by 8, so this is 8 components by 8 components. If we set this to 12 by 12, we're going to get a overall resolution of 757 by 757. So if you know the resolution in which you would like to use, you can choose to do that. And if you just want to increase the number of components, you can also feel free to do that. Now, once we have done that, the next thing we can do is we can look at these two buttons here at the bottom. The first one is the fill world, and so what this will do is this will expand our world to the expand our landscape, sorry, to the entirety of our world. And this is great if you really just want a really large landscape. And the next one is the option to create, and once we click that, Unreal will go ahead and compile the landscape, and we are free to start to sculpt. Okay, so let's have a look at the sculpting tools, and then we're going to delete this landscape and then jump back into perhaps the importation of a custom file. So straight away you see that we have this brush, and this brush is basically just using the simple sculpt tool, and below that we have some basic settings. We have the brush strength, so how much influence the brush has in creating our mountains. We have the brush size, so I can decrease this or set this back to default. You see I can increase and decrease the brush size. And so if I just make this a little bigger so it's easier to see. Below that we have the brush fall off, and so this is the distance between this inner circle and the outer circle. So right now if we hold down the control key and click, you can see that we have these nice smooth transitions, or fairly smooth transitions. However, if I increase the, there we go, if I decrease the fall off, you can see we're going to get this much more, we're going to get much more of an angle here, so it's going to just increase the stiffness or the harshness of the mountain. So I'm going to set this back to default, and let's just make this a little bigger. So below that, if we click on this, we can see that we have access to a smooth tool. So if we press and hold the control key and click, we can smooth this off. So this might be a little more noticeable here on this very rigid edge. You can see that now it's nice and smooth. Below that we have the flatten, and so the flatten will flatten the landscape based upon the elevation in which you click. So if I click here on the ground, so I hold the control key and click on the ground, you can see that I'm going to flatten the land. And if I click here on the top, I can just start to flatten it based on that elevation. Below that we have the ramp, and so what this will do, this will essentially create a ramp for us. So we click on the point in which we want to start, and we click on the point in which we want to end, and you can see that it draws out this ramp for us. And in here we have some settings in which we can alter. We can change the width of the ramp, and we can change the fall off. And basically we just have one simple option here to add the ramp. Okay, so that's basically what this does. Now below that we have the erosion, and so this is going to simulate the effects that the effects of erosion on maybe the side of the mountain or the side of a cliff. It's pretty straightforward. The next option is also an erosion option. However, the difference is that the hydraulic erosion is dealing with the erosion that happens once water moves over the surface. Okay, and this option has a bunch more options over here. So if you want to play around with some of those tool settings, I would encourage you to do so to get a different effect. I'm going to reset these all back to default, and we can get something that looks like this. Okay, so after that we have the noise, and this is just going to add some random noise to our landscape. That's pretty simple. And below that we have the retopologize, and so essentially what this does is it's going to optimize our landscape by retopologizing any sort of overlapped or crunched vertices. I would recommend that you perhaps run this over the area that you have created every once in a while, just to make sure that everything it looks nice and the topology is quite good. Okay, so we have some more options underneath here. We have the visibility, so this is dealing with whether or not we can make a section of our landscape visible or not, but that is also based on the material, so we're not going to cover that. We also have a selection, so we can make selections of our land, and then we can copy and paste them into different areas. We're not going to cover that in here. And we also have the option to mirror one side of our landscape to the other. Now just going back over to the sculpting tools. So I showed you that if I press the CTRL or the control key, I can make these mountains. Now the opposite of that, if I just increase the size of my brush here to make it a little easier for you to see, the opposite of that is if I press the shift key, the SHIFT key, you can see that I can make these ditches. Now if it's too strong here, maybe we can set this to a little lower, like 0.1, and you can see that we're going to get less of an influence. Okay, so that's essentially the basics of creating our landscape. You would then go through and use those tools and sort of paint out your mountains and ditches and lakes and so on and so forth. Now there is a secondary way in which we can create a landscape, and that is based on a height map. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press the new level and just reset this. I'm going to press no, and I'm going to select this and delete it again. And I'm just going to open up this file right here so you can see. Okay, so this is a height map, and what this does is where the white areas are is going to increase the elevation, and where the dark areas are, we're going to get a decrease in elevation, with the sort of gray being somewhat of a mid-toned elevation, sort of like the average. So to use this, what we need to do is we go back over to our landscape tool, and instead of using the create new, we want to choose this option that says import from file. And we have a bunch of options here, so let's just quickly run through them. So the first one is we're going to plug in our height map. So we plug this in over here. Below that we have the height map record. Okay, so we can change this based on this once we've imported this here. So let me just import this so we can see. Bring this in. Okay, and what it's going to do is the record is going to try and determine the information that is already in the height map, and going to try and guess the accurate size. Below that we have the material. Again, this is dealing with landscape material, so let's just jump over this for a moment. We can change whether or not this is additive or layered. Again, we have access to the layers, again relating to the materials over here. We have the location, rotation, and scale, which we've already covered. We have the section size, and it's recognized that this is 127 by 127, which is pretty good. This is going to assume that this is 2 by 2. I'm going to decrease this actually to maybe 1 by 1. Let's have a look. Or maybe we can set this 2 by 2. Let's see. Maybe it's going to be fine. And then we have the number of components. Now this is set to 16 by 16. I want something a little larger. So maybe 32 by 32, which is going to give me, let's see, a resolution of 1024, which is pretty good. Once we have that, we can simply click the import button and let Unreal compile those settings. And once it's done that, we would have imported a height map successfully. So I'm just going to wait for Unreal here, and you're going to potentially hear my fans kick in just a minute. But once that's done, we will then be presented with something that looks like this. So this is a rather large landscape, and if I jump out of the landscape mode and look for my player start, I'm just going to type in player start and double click on this. You see we're going to start way up here in the sky, but perhaps we want to start all the way down here. So I'm going to take this and push this all the way down here. And to zoom in, all I do is just press the F key. Okay, so let's just keep going, press F. Looks like we're almost on the land here. And that's it. So now when we press play, we have imported our landscape successfully. So that's the very basics of importing a landscape. In the next video, we will look at adding some materials to a landscape like this. Until next time, I'd like to thank you for watching, and bye-bye for now.